Imagine going on a space trip to start a new life, but due to a malfunction you wake up too early and are left alone on the ship for over 80 years. That's why today, passengers. The story begins on a space colonization ship carrying future colonists in hibernation. The journey was going well until a meteor shower damages the ship, causing Chris Pratt, who will be known as Ing, to prematurely wake up from his sleep. At first, he is excited by the pre-programmed messages from the holograms, but soon realizes something is wrong as he is the only one awake. Through a hologram, he learns that he woke up 90 years too early. Saddened and desperate, he tries to send a message to Earth, but is told it will take at least 55 years to receive a response. He walks the halls until he meets a bartender who is overjoyed to talk to him, but quickly realizes the bartender is an android named Artur, who serves him a drink. Later, we see him there undecided on trying to hibernate again since, luckily, he is an engineer and has access to all the ship's manuals and tools, so he starts working on his capsule, reactivating it, but only almost gets stuck there. Then he tries to force the crew's entry in different ways, but he can't. Later, we see that the ship is still presenting increasingly greater failures, such as the doors again in the bar game. He asks Artur for advice and he tells him to enjoy the moment, which motivates him to follow his advice. With his skills and tools, he decides to live the good life on the cruise, doing things like getting a luxury room, eating and drinking a lot at expensive restaurants, watching movies, and so on. But we see how time goes by and loneliness and monotony start to affect him both physically and mentally. One day, while walking drunk, he can see a room with spacesuits that allow you to leave the ship. Jim breaks down and falls into depression to the point of considering suicide by leaving the ship without his suit. But at the last second, he decides not to do it and runs back. In one moment, he trips and falls from the bottle he had previously thrown. He gets up and by chance he meets the co-protagonist Jennifer, who I'll call Aurora, and is a writer who is still in hibernation. Gradually, Jim starts to become obsessed with her, reading her biography over and over again, eating next to her, and so on, until he comes up with the idea of waking her up so he won't be alone. But knowing he would sentence her to die before reaching the destination. So he decides to seek advice from his friend Artur, but as expected he can't help. Then the thought begins to linger more and more in Jim's head as he uses his little sanity to try not to, but ends up giving in and decides to wake up Aurora. After doing this, he runs scared to his room about what he did. A few minutes pass before he can calm down and go to the lobby where both of them are, and Jim tells Aurora what is happening, that they both woke up earlier and only they are awake, but he omits the part where he woke her up. Finally, she asks him how long he has been awake, a year in 3 weeks. At that moment, Aurora goes into shock and runs trying to find her capsule, but Jay catches up and calms her down, making her rational. Later, Jim returns to the bar and asks Artur not to tell the truth in the morning. The next day, the two of them are in the cafeteria, and while Aurora shares her first-class breakfast with him, she presents him with multiple options to go back in Bernard, but Jim denies all of them because he already tried each one of them. Later, Aurora decides to try to do things the same way, but quickly realizes it is useless. Meanwhile, Jim sees a cleaning robot fail and realizes that these failures on the entire ship are becoming more frequent. 1 week after Aurora starts having a routine and making a diary of her new way of life, saying that she has already resigned. Soon after, she finds herself there and decides to socialize with him, interviewing him and asking about his reasons for deciding to take the space trip in the first place. Jim responds that he no longer saw a future on Earth and no longer felt useful there. They spend time together and become closer to the point where Jim asks her out. Aurora and Jim go to a bar, where she meets Harto de Hunan and they chat. Finally, they reach the spacesuit's airlock and go out, having a great time. They kiss and spend the night together, and both seem happy doing everything together, even though the ship's malfunctions are still present. After a year, Jim celebrates his birthday and they have a birthday party that ends up at a bar with Art and in a casual conversation. Gene says he has no secrets with Aurora, but shortly after, while Jim goes to the bathroom to find a wedding ring, Artur confesses to Aurora that Jim was the one who woke her up. This leaves her in shock and demands someone confess, which he does, and she leaves horrified. The days go by and she is still devastated, and even though Jim speaks to her through a speaker trying to apologize, he has no success. Time goes by and they reach a point where they decide not to talk to each other. In a final attempt at reconciliation, James plants a tree on the ship. However, the ship's failures are no longer minor and all kinds of failures start to appear all the time. At one point, Jim and now they hear the voice of the deck chief named Cost. They gather in the lobby where the tree is and tell him that the ship is having failures. So Gus decides to make a manual diagnosis and sends each of them to a different part of the ship. At one point, as Stu checks the capsules, he realizes that it was Jim who opened the gold capsule. Now he understands it after having spent so much time alone and realizes that the important thing is that after that, they find out that he is not sick due to the failure of his hibernation capsule. Later, the three of them gather in the navigation room and conclude that the ship has been suffering failures since the day it woke up earlier. That same night, as Tu and Kim sleep, Aurora is swimming in the pool when another failure affects gravity. Tu, who is asleep, is barely affected and floats out of bed, while the most affected is Aurora, who is now drowning in the pool because with the water, a water sphere is formed that traps her and nearly kills her. But fortunately, the gravity returns and Aurora can get out of the pool. Both of them find each other and go to see what happened there. The three of them discover that the origin of the failure is in the engineering room and that if they don't fix it, the whole ship will stop functioning. Quickly, they head to the room to find the failure and when they were about to search, he faints. So now the three of them go to the infirmary. A diagnosis indicates that all the organs of Tu are failing and he has little time left. Suddenly the ship crashes and all systems fail. They send Aurora to look for something and she finds it in a living room with her uniform already in the last moments. Tells both of them to take care of each other and to fix the ship to save everyone. They give him a bracelet with which he will have access to all systems. Then, with his last breath, he sees what has happened. Aurora and Jim decide to work together to fix the ship and head to the engineering room. When they try to open it, Aurora is pulled inside by a meteorite that has depressurized the chamber. She barely holds on, and Jim manages to cover the hole, but the damage from the meteorite is greater and it spreads to the ship's reactor. When they arrive at the reactor, they notice that the computer that controls it is damaged and quickly search for spare parts. Suddenly, the ship starts to shake. Later, they manage to reach the spare parts in time, and Jim replaces the damaged part, but the reactor still doesn't work and enters critical state. Now they try to vent it, but the fan is also damaged. Then Jim tells Aurora that he will have to manually open the hatch from the outside, in their suits. Aurora gives him instructions on how to open the ventilation hatch. Armed with an improvised shield, he heads towards the exit, but she now stops him and asks him to be careful. Finally, forgiving her at that moment, he goes outside and simultaneously Aurora runs to the reactor room and manages to hold the ventilation lever that was injured in her arm. Meanwhile, he is reaching the external ventilation but the hatch does not open, so he must do it manually. But now there is a problem because the hatch does not stay open and both of them have to stay to keep it so. They argue because Aurora knows it is very dangerous, but Jimmy explains and reminds her that there are many more passengers on the ship and they have to do it. He tells her one more time to pull the lever and Aurora does, and the action sets the reactor flames on fire, injuring Jimmy, but he still manages to get inside. He can no longer bear it and is expelled with force and ends up breaking the guide cable that keeps him safe. Meanwhile, the reactor stabilizes, the systems restart, and the engines start working. But without his guide cable, James is heading straight towards the engines. The shield holds with all its strength and manages to throw him off course and change direction. They also manage to contact Aurora. She tells him it worked and he can return, but Jim says it is not possible because he lost his guide cable and his suit is losing pressure. Anguished by what she hears, Aurora tells Jim to go for him. With his last effort, while adrift and losing air, he apologizes and expresses that he would have liked to live with her. Aurora finally gets the suit and looks for him, finds him and jumps. She is about to reach him, but her own guide cable reaches its limit, but luckily some of it stays attached. She sees him, manages to hold on to him, and drags him towards the ship. With difficulty, she manages to bring him to the infirmary where the diagnosis indicates that he is dead, but now she does not give up and asks the machine to revive him, which apparently is not possible according to protocols. But then she remembers she has the GOS bracelet and with some trial and error, she remembers the access code and applies all the resuscitation protocols with a set of tools. The machine uses them all at the same time to revive Jim. After a moment of tension, he revives in breathing, and excited Aurora jumps on her beloved and kisses him and both are safe. Some time passes and we find them checking the capsule, and Aurora applying makeup to Arthur, who suffered damage to his face when the ship was in critical condition. Shortly after, we see them performing a space funeral, letting him go into infinite space through the exclusion hatch. At that moment, Jim asks Aurora to go to the infirmary. Once there, he explains that with voice access codes, he found a way to convert the medical capsule into a nation and offers her the opportunity to take the position in the capsule since there is only one. Unfortunately, he will have to stay awake. We change the scene and see Kim alone at the bar with Arthur holding the wedding ring he wanted to give to Aurora. Then we see Aurora arrive at the ship and offer him marriage, and she happily accepts with a final kiss. Finally, we see the destination planet 88 years after the events. When the crew members of the ship begin to awaken, they arrive at the lobby amazed to see it turned into a large garden with a huge tree in the center and with a message engraved by Aurora welcoming them. Don't forget to comment which movie you would like me to summarize. Like, subscribe and activate the bell to not miss the next videos.